So as we come into this space together, just close your eyes wherever you are, wherever you're listening from around the globe. And as you breathe, just taking in and acknowledging the truth that both the divine feminine and the divine masculine aspects both live and move through you as you. Big inhale, filling into both of those energies. That strong sense of stability, grounding, protector. And inhaling again, that free flowing creative movement and emotion. Knowing that inside of you is total wholeness, total completeness of both of these energies of father and mother, grandfather, grandmother, brother and sister, sun and moon.
Open yourself up to the love and unique love and gifts that both these energies offer. And may we be in tune and able to hear their unique voices and their unique gifts and teachings that both of these energies give us.
And so it is.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Thank you for this. Wow. So beautiful. While you were saying father and mother, literally in that moment, my parents just called me.
Oh, wow.
I heard the little vibration. That's awesome. Yeah, thank you two so much. And welcome to everyone. Welcome to all of our audience and listeners, wherever it is that you're tuning in from in the world today. Welcome. So today we're sitting down with Ash and Matt of the Yoga Couple on Instagram, and they are some of the most influential in my life personally, but they're just real thought leaders and communicators, beautiful communicators on the liberation of self and coming into alignment with the path of true freedom and lasting happiness. And today we're going to be opening up deep dialogue on different topics such as conscious coupling and the book that they co-authored together, The Inner Work, and how they've implemented these philosophies and practices into their lives of gaining awareness within themselves, and just how we can show up more fully to love in our relationships and our partnerships, and obviously with the self as well. So welcome, Ash and Matt.
Thank you so much
Thank you for having us.
I'm happy to be back because it's my second time here on Sacred Sisters. So thank you.
And
Yes.
I'm so honored to be the first masculine energy on the podcast. That's awesome.
Yes, thank you so much. So I guess we'll just kind of start with, we would love to kind of know a little bit of y'all's backstory, and I don't know how far back you want to go, but even like how you met or how you like came to know each other. We have so many questions for you.
Yeah, it's good that you asked this because we were actually just reflecting on this. I feel, was that last night?
Last night, yeah.
Last night, about how our meeting was such a divine encounter that if we ever lose faith in knowing that we're divinely guided, that we've been given the blessing of just having each other as a reflection of being divinely guided, the fact that we've even met and that we're together was just,
It's pretty miraculous.
It was really miraculous. And so all we need to do is just review our meeting story to remember that we're in this mystical, magical world where everything is conspiring to put us on the exact path that we're meant to be on.
Yeah, and to help you understand that, Ash, tell them how it happened.
Yeah, I found Matt accidentally quote unquote.
We were talking about it last night. Like, why did she randomly just have this urge to go on Google?
Yeah, I was inspired in a random moment to remember the name of a retreat center that I had seen driving by several years ago in another state. So I lived in Las Vegas at the time. And several years prior, I drove by a yoga retreat center in Santa Barbara called the White Lotus. And one day I was inspired to remember that retreat center and to feel divinely guided to go Google that retreat center and look it up, because I thought I should go to this retreat center, but I couldn't remember the name. And so when I typed in Lotus Yoga Retreat, it led me to Matthew's blog. And
Wow.
Up until that time, I had been deeply meditating and praying and journaling, scripting about meeting my soulmate. So just in a random afternoon, I was downloaded the inspiration to go Google those words, Lotus, meditation, yoga, and was guided to Matthew's blog. And in a few minutes of reading his blog, not even knowing what he looked like or how old he was, I knew that we had a very deep soul connection and reached out to him. Thought he was an older man, actually. And then realized he was, my age and obviously so handsome.
Like 20 days apart.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Matt also too.
And at that same time, I was also extremely consciously manifesting my soul companion and my soulmate. And I was very actively looking and what you would say like dating to marry. Like I was very specific. I was like thinking of everything I wanted. I was writing it out. I was manifesting it. And I even did this really interesting thing where if we're all connected and everything is energy and there's no distance, I was posing an experiment and a theory of like, well, then she should technically be able to hear me right now. And so I would speak to her
through the ether.
Through the ether at night, and I'd be like, I love you, like I know you're coming. I would act like she was next to me already, like when I would go to sleep. So I was like doing some really conscious practices of calling her in, and then lo and behold, I get like this Facebook friend invite, like, and then just kind of within a few weeks, it just seemed so uncanny. Like the way she wrote, the things she was interested in, I was just like, who is this person? It was like the most divine reflection I had ever seen. And we started writing each other, and the questions were things like, what is the purpose of life? Like, what is your view of like God? What is this all for? And before you know it, it was just like meant to be. And we decided to meet in all places, Santa Barbara,
where that retreat center was.
So. And so the synchronicities are just incredible and insane. And it's just like, that's why like we always think like if we ever need to remember that this is all a simulation, it's all like this divine consciousness. It's like us meeting is the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
You can't even like make that up.
I was given the key words that I needed spontaneously to be guided exactly to him, and all he had to do was wait, and I showed up in his,
put it out there,
in his inbox. So that's how it all works, and I'm really grateful for that.
Wow.
Our special meeting, because it reminds us that that's whenever we're worrying about what's going to happen next in our life, we just need to remember that it's all going to unfold in that very magical way, just like that.
Oh my gosh.
Just like that. It's so funny. Sorry, Hannah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've literally just been crying this whole time. First off, I'm in my inner winter.
Okay.
I'm waiting for my moon cycle to start. I'm 1 day late right now. So I am just taken aback by my own emotion right now. Was not anticipating this. I was like, I know their story. Like, these are good friends of mine. But yeah, this is such a refreshing story to hear, and thank you so much for telling it in such evocative detail. I feel like that's what got my emotions going so much, because there is this there can be such a level of disenchantment from so many people who are around our age, who are tapped into the digital dating and things, that are just so resolute and so sure that they know the way that the world is now, and that like the people that are out there and the ways that the partner, like the struggles and the traumas and the issues that their partner is going to come with, and that they just need to kind of settle for that. And I guess this is, a big topic that I want to talk about today, is kind of like learning how to reframe that. And it seems like you two maybe had it as an intention in conceptualizing the inner workbook, as learning how to reframe the mind and realize that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's something I think is really important to hit on, is kind of with the spiritual interest happening, especially in conscious coupling, is that although our story was really magical, we were not prepared to deal with the amount of inner work it was going to take to become the people that we saw ourselves and each other to be. And when we first met, actually, it's important that everybody knows this, because it's very magical. But when we first met each other, we actually had a very hard time. We were not connected sexually. We had such a deep connection intellectually. And then when we met in our bodies, it didn't match. And we were very confused as to how to be together in person, because they're each other's mannerisms, each other's way of doing things, or the way we spoke, or just everything.
And we came from two different worlds. Like, I was a country, like rural forest kind of a boy, and she was like a city girl. And so there were a lot of dynamics that were very opposite. And but the soul connection was there. And so it's taken us, we're coming up on 7 years together. It's taken all this time to perfect it and to heal and to figure it out. I mean, and another thing that was interesting is the energy dynamics were different. Being perhaps a city girl, being raised by her dad, whatever the case was, Ashley was more so the masculine energy, and I was a little more raised by my mom and so forth. And we can maybe get into a lot more of this, but I was a little more feminine, and so the energy dynamics were off. There were a lot of things that were interestingly off, and we had to really persevere through it. But the reason that we stayed through it is because we knew on the soul level that we were meant to be together. And it's important for people to understand that without a spiritual connection, every relationship will fall. You have to have that as the backbone, because it's what will see through all the worldly differences, like these things we're talking about.
And settling for us is settling for somebody who's not committed to the work. Yeah. So no matter what the challenges are, traumas, inner child healing, wounds, all of these things are not, what would I say, like stop, like they're not enough to not want to keep persevering. It's if one of the other person wants to stop healing.
Yeah, because everyone's going to have wounds. And I think that's the misconception in this current, you brought up like this dating era, is we've noticed people think that you should find your conscious couple. That means like you're perfect together and you don't have any problems.
And they're already
healed. And now you're like ready because you're both whole and you're ready to share. And that's like all very idealistic, but it's completely unrealistic, because you are going to have wounds that you are going to not know existed until you were in a committed relationship. And so you might have done, Ashley and I thought we were so enlightened individually, but as soon as we got together, we were like, what? Like we had all kinds of issues. And it's because you can't really know who you truly are, in our opinion, until you've been in a committed relationship. Like I always tell men, you don't really even know your potential until you've been committed to a woman genuinely, for like true heart and soul commitment to her, because it will reveal things that you don't know are there. It'll reveal things that, like we call them blind spots.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I love that you touched on that, because that was one of the things that I wrote about, how my husband reveals things inside of me that I had no idea existed. And that includes blessings and gifts, but also like these inner triggers and wounds. And I love that you touched on this, because it is so important in this time to be aware that a conscious partnership is partially blessings together and growing together, but then also triggering each other, because that is really what brings us this inner growth. And I love how you just talked about the story and how you both came from a very different background. And I've heard that a lot with twin flames, that it's almost like it's the opposite, like one is yin, the other one is yang, and we find each other, and then we have to figure out, okay, how can we like come together in union? And it's very similar for my husband and I, and how we met. I'm going to share this little story because it has such a magic to it, because it was so random, you know, in the sense you could tell it was so random, but it was actually not random at all. So I actually got out of like a really bad relationship, and I was done. I was kind of like done with men. I was like, I don't even want to commit to anything, and I just need to heal myself and focus on myself right now. But at the same time, I was like really focusing on expressing myself fully, and really focusing on healing the wounds and all of the things that I've had gathered from the other relationship. And so really coming to this place of like seeing myself as whole again, and, you know, learning about myself on a deeper level. And I was on Facebook, and I was like, I'm just going to confirm all these friend requests that I've been getting. I've gotten so many random friend requests from people, because I was working as a model, so I had so many like photographers and producers and stuff friend requesting me. And because of my past relationship, that man was like very controlling, so he didn't want me to model, so I completely ignored that part. And so after I got out of it, I was like, I'm just gonna like, you know, open myself up to any possibility, whatever wants to come into my life. And so I confirmed all these friend requests. And one of the people that I confirmed there as a friend ended up messaging me and says, hey, I have this job, and it was like ridiculous pay for like no work at all. Like it was like at an event in Beverly Glen, and it sounded way too good to be true, like way too good to be true. So I was like, I don't even know if I can trust that man. He's from Facebook. Like, I don't even know. And then at the same time, what was going on, that my husband Alex he lived in LA, but he was in Las Vegas to visit his family, and he goes to an ice cream shop. And the lady at the ice cream shop had these magazines, Las Vegas magazine, and he was on the cover of Las Vegas magazine. So she recognized him as being a model. And she was like, you know, my friend has this event in Beverly Glen, and they're still looking for a male model for that. Do you want to do that? And he's like, yeah, okay. And so we both ended up at this event. And the day of the event, I was actually thinking about not going there, because I was like, I don't know, like it's like a stranger on Facebook. The pay sounds way too good to be true. Like, it's just like super suspicious. You know, my mind came in, and then my heart was like, you have to go. You just have to go. And so I'm like, all right. I'm just gonna go, and if it's kind of shady, I'm just gonna leave. So I get there, and it's like the most amazing, beautiful house, and all the people were super nice. And I see him, and I didn't even, because I didn't have like my radar up of like looking for someone, I wasn't even like, and for some reason I thought, my gosh, I would never be with a male model, just because I had judgments in that regards of like, I want to connect on a soul level. Like, I don't care how people look like. And I felt like it was, you know, with male models, I felt like maybe they are like super self-absorbed, you know, and like, I was like, no. So I didn't even open my eyes to that. And so we had a break, and I was just standing outside, and I was looking out into the horizon, and there was an infinity pool, and it was the most magical just most magical atmosphere. And he came next to me and we started talking, and I realized, oh wow, he's really nice and cool, and everything just like with you too. Like first it was like this inner level that I really, really resonated with, and then I was like, oh wow, and he's really good looking too. Like, well, how is this even possible? Yeah. And then you know, his airy self of being super direct, he was like, you know, can I have your number? I want to date you. And I've never had this kind of like masculine energy, of such a direct energy, like someone saying, hey, I really like you. Do you want to go out on a date? Because usually men with me were like a little bit intimidated. And so I really, really loved that. And I was like, yeah, I do. And that's how it started. And then 2 days later, we committed to a relationship. And then I moved in with him 3 weeks later.
So beautiful.
So it was, and yeah, it's just these magical synchronicities and little moments. And a lot of times our mind might tell us like, no, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't go. Like even the first date, when he asked me, because we were on the phone for a while and it was like 11 p.m. and he's like, do you like want to come over maybe? It was like at night. And I was like, I don't know if I should go over. He lives in North Hollywood with 2 other guys. And my mind was like, you gotta like be aware of this. This could be dangerous. And my heart, no, you gotta go. So it's just so funny. It was such a struggle between mind and heart for me, and then just always choosing the heart and just trusting there's a reason why this is happening, and there's such a deep soul connection. And I love that you two were touching on that, because it is really, that is the base, the foundation of a successful relationship, is always remembering that deep soul connection that we have with each other, even when anything else is challenging us and struggling us. But having this deep soul connection to each other really gets you through anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to find that balance between the head and the heart. The head is always trying to protect you, and the heart is always trying to immerse you back into oneness
and guide you.
So it's this balance, but they're both so necessary. So it's an interesting thing to become aware of which one you're going to listen to and when, because there are times, right, where the mind trying to protect us is a great gift. Mm-hmm. And then there are times where it's definitely getting in the way, and only we know which one it is and when. So tuning into that and practicing that is really what intuition is practicing that balance and knowing thyself so much that we know how to heed our own inner guidance in that way. So I like that you brought up the head and the heart in kind of going head to head with each other.
Yeah. That was one of our topics that we really wanted to touch on, is what your take is on twin flames. So we love that you mentioned soulmates, and we wanted to talk about karmic relationships as well. And I mean, I feel like I have to share my little introduction to my now husband now. Mm-hmm. I always think it's so fascinating to hear the beginnings of relationships, especially that are, you know, a couple years in, you've done really challenging work together. And again, like both of you were saying, just really anchoring yourselves to what it is that drew you together in the first place, and really holding that with so much, just with so much honor and so much regard in the moments that feel super challenging and you just want to throw your hands up, because there's something about that connection that really continues drawing you back if both of you do want to continue doing that work, because it's super challenging. And I'm really grateful that all of you, well, Hannah, you didn't share so much about the challenge and conflict that you and Alex have worked through, but I really loved Ash and Matt sharing their, just a brief glimpse of the challenges that they had been through. And that is such a testament, especially to people who are listening to this right now and who are wanting to call in that conscious partnership, or wanting to even know how to open up dialogue in a partnership that they already have been having for a long time. And maybe they're feeling a spiritual shift or an awakening inside of themselves, and they have no idea how to bring it up to their partners. So we're going to touch on that probably just after. So I feel like my story is pretty different. I met my now husband when he was 11 years old, and I was almost 15, and it was very strange at first. I will always remember the first moment that I laid eyes on him. I was really good friends with his sister, his older sister, and I went to her house for the first time. I lived in the same neighborhood as them, and we were friends in high school. I went over to her house, and she's like, and that's my brother Curtis. And he had his back to me, and I look into his room. I don't even think he turned around to say hello, as a matter of fact. But there was something inside of me that, like, it was this magnetic sort of, I felt like I knew exactly who he was. And even the fact that he didn't turn around and say hello to me, I felt like that was something that I needed to know so deeply in my life, because of my past was so different than that. Like I cared way too much about what people thought about me, and I was constantly looking for friendships and validation, and just wanting to be cared for. I'm Cancer rising, and just like having my little friend groups and family, and feeling accepted and loved was just this. It's a huge part of my story, and searching for that, but never really feeling it. And there was a part of me that when I first saw him, I was just like, what kind of creature is that? Like, what is that about? How can you be so grounded in yourself that you just don't care what anybody thinks about you, or that, anybody has to say about you? You're just like so grounded in yourself, and you just know who you are, and you show up, and you don't even think about who you're showing up as. You just are, you just be. It was just so foreign to me. And there was something about that was so enchanting to me. And I felt like I really wanted to know it so much more. And, I would find myself there more and more often, and not always to hang out with my friend. And, this continued for 8 years. And I would tell my friend Christina sometimes, like, I have a crush on your brother, and I don't know what to do about it. And I have to be honest, she wasn't ever usually very encouraging of it. She would say, like, I don't really know what to say about that. And that was another part of my battle too, because there was a part of me that was like, okay, I'm telling my best friend that I have a crush on her brother. She's not into it. So what do I do about it? Because I feel this intense connection to him. And then one thing led to the next. Their dad had passed away, and their mom had wanted to go and stay with her family in California through the grieving process. And Curtis was alone in the house by himself. And Christina and I were roommates for years. And we said she was going to go move into her house that she grew up in with Curtis. And she was like, well, you should just come too, and we'll all live together. It'll be like we were always partying together. And inside I was like, oh, I'm going to move in with him. It was like devious for sure when I look back on it. Because as soon as I moved into that house, in the first 2 weeks at least, like I would just like curl myself up really tiny on the couch, and just like, I don't know, I was feeling this charge that he wasn't feeling. And we think that's such a funny part of our story too, because he had no idea ever. Like, he never had a crush on me. He like saw me as like the untouchable fruit because I was like his sister's friend, and he just never even considered anything like that to ever happen. And then the first 2 weeks that I was in the house, I was like, okay, something's going to happen one day. And one night I invited Christina and Curtis out to a birthday party of a photographer friend out here. And we got home, and Christina and I broke up with our boyfriends on the same day, and she was interested in this other guy that she's still with now, and she went over to his house that night. And I was upstairs in my bedroom, and he was downstairs watching TV one night, and I was just like, Curtis, and like called him upstairs to come and hang out. And he knew when I called his name, he was like, oh, this is different. And like, that was the beginning of the end. I like got something inside of me, the gusto to kiss him the first time. And we've been together ever since. And, whenever I first started coming into astrology, especially, it was so fascinating because just being able to look at these astrological maps that are completely just solely depicted from our unique birth information, and seeing when you lay his over mine, that his sun, his like energetic persona, the way that he shines his spirit, is conjunct with my midheaven, which is like the way that I aspire to shine in this life. And like the first time that I saw that, I was it just all made sense to me. And I feel like it's those things about self-knowledge systems that really allow us to relax into our experience and trust more.
Yeah. And you're an Aquarius North Node too, which is like all about just being yourself, not caring about what other people think. And he's an Aquarius rising, so he embodies all of that.
And that's his perspective on life, is just to embody himself and do the things and be the rebel. And it's, my North Node is my life's mission towards that. That's what I seek to embody in this life.
That's beautiful. No, that's like, I don't even know what that is. That's not even twin flame and soulmate. That's like a whole nother level. We need a new name for that.
I just feel like it's so fascinating to it's like, whether you're trying to manifest something or not, I feel like having some sort of intentionality toward I don't know, what would you all say that it is? Because Matt, you were saying that you were talking to your soulmate and you were calling her in, you were actively speaking with her. Ash, you were doing the same, and you two were attracted to one another. Hannah, you lean into your heart over your head. And like, what are these things that can lead us just to these really divine meetings?
Well, it sounds like in all cases there was something within all of us that was open to finding it. Like Brittany, you noticed right away that you were drawn to it because there was something in him that you saw like as a draw and an attraction. And then same with Hannah, she's like sharing how there was an openness she had to just kind of lean into, and it was surrender, through the surrender it was revealed. And then for us it was just a little more obvious openness, but it's all the same thing. Is like, all you have to do is be open and willing, and it will be revealed. It seems like in all cases it always comes down to that, is like, will you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear? Because the signs will always be there. It's just, are we willing to pay attention to it?
And I love in your story too, Britt, that it can sometimes happen that you meet your soulmate or twin flame too early. You're just not ready yet to be together. Be patient. Yeah, you gotta be patient.
Yeah, I think I had to go through my fair share of really toxic, bad relationships. I think in the time that I knew him till we got together, I was in 3 different like kind of long-term relationships, and all of them were toxic in their own way. And I'm not saying that moments of our relationship haven't been super toxic too, but that's another one of the things that you sign up for whenever you're entering a conscious partnership as well.
Yeah, and since we were talking about conscious partnership, I would love to hear your take on, Ash and Matt's, your take on what is a conscious partnership?
For me, I would say it's it's kind of what Ash said earlier. It's the commitment to always look at yourself and to use the relationship as a mirror to take accountability and to have at the foundation of the relationship the commitment to always grow and evolve. And one of the things for me, like when we met, I went into the relationship like very scientifically in a lot of ways too. With the psych background that I had, I like studied literally in my classes, like why are relationships failing? And some of the biggest things that I really noticed is that there has to be a goal to and a plan for how are you going to get through change, because in life and in marriages there's always going to be change, and there's always going to be confrontation, and there's always going to be obstacles. And if we go into relationships thinking they're not going to be there and we don't have a plan or a strategy for them, then they'll always fail. Of course, that's why over 50% of marriages fails, because they don't think about that when they go into the marriage. They're just like, this is really great, I'm really attracted to this person, it's going to be beautiful. And so for us, it really came down to both of us having an extreme commitment to like, I will always work on myself and I will always evolve, because that fundamental belief will get you through anything that may come up in your mortal life together.
And then I would say that the difference too is that a conscious companionship isn't rooted in the same goal as, I would say, a worldly relationship, because in a worldly relationship, the goal is to make each other happy and fulfill a void. So like if the other person isn't making you happy or isn't fulfilling some sort of desire or model of what you think the relationship is, then you feel like it's a failure.
It's like ego fulfillment. Like the world relationship is you're with someone who fulfills and uplifts and, you know, boosts your ego.
So when they don't show up in that way that you have that expectation, you think something's wrong, you think you need to end it, you think you need to move on. Whereas in a conscious relationship, you're expecting all of the upheaval. You go into it knowing that the purpose of our companionship is not to make each other happy. It's to reveal to each other where we aren't making ourselves happy. And so your conscious companionship is for the purpose of purification of consciousness, like conscious companionship. Yeah. It's for the purification of your consciousness. I mean, that has to be the basis of a conscious companionship. It's all about consciousness. So through our experience and our lived life together, we are able to see where we still have layers of those unhealed wounds, those inner child unmet needs, traumas that we have not resolved, limiting belief systems, projections that are really coming from inside of ourselves because we finally have someone to project onto. So when you go into a conscious companionship, it's literally the opposite, because you expect this is going to be really a lot, because we're going to purify our consciousness together, which means we have to deal with all the crap together. And it's for the purpose of healing and becoming our true selves, which is that purification of love and light and the joy of our Creator. So much different goal. It's not to satisfy.
It's like to transcend the ego rather than to cater to it.
Exactly.
Yes. Wow. And I feel like in so many cases that is happening because we are so different to each other. Like I feel like especially the twin flame relationships, just as you were saying, Ash, you were a city girl, and Matt, you're more the forest guy. And it was similar to Alex and me. We're such opposite ways of backgrounds where we came from, and our perspectives in life are so different. And sometimes that brings up clashes, you know, and it brings struggles because we're like trying to connect these different perspectives of life and bring them together in these different belief systems. But at the same time, every time when he brings up his point of view, it might at first trigger me, you know, and then I'm like, oh, wow, where does that trigger come from? Why is this triggering me? What lies beneath it? How am I actually pushing that away from me as not my truth, and how can I reintegrate that as part of my truth as well, or as part of life's truths. And it's been so eye-opening. Like, I remember when I first met him, I came from, like, I did like a whole struggle with my belief and meaning in life. So I was raised Catholic, and then I felt very much connected to God. I had like my own connection to God, and was very in tune with that. But I didn't have like a spiritual practice in that sense. So I didn't really learn about spirituality or spiritual practice. I just felt like this unique connection to it. And then I ended up meeting this this man who I had a very toxic relationship with, but he was an atheist. So I actually wanted to help him feel more connected, but what actually happened was that he made me feel more connected to science and really dive into the whole scientific way of looking at things, and just taking out the magic of life. So I had this time period of like 1.5 years where it literally took out the magic of my life and the meaning. And after I broke up with him, I was like in the process of slowly bringing that magic and meaning back into my life. And when I met Alex, he was just, for him, it was just part of his life. Like, one of the things that he said to me, he's like, you know, of course extraterrestrials exist. Like, of course, like the Mayan calendar has a deeper meaning to it. And I came from such an like, atheist, scientific oriented perspective where I was like, how silly, you know? I just like judged him for it. And now I'm like, yeah, duh, you know? But I needed to have that complete opposite perspective in life. And he actually was the catalyst for my spiritual journey to dive deeper into that. And I was his catalyst for his own journey. Like, he really learned more about, you know, how to be more compassionate and forgiving with others, and how to feel more into the feminine through me. And it's been, yeah, it's just so fascinating how we attract these opposite types. And for you, Britt, too, you know, you needed to have someone else to make you feel loved and supported. And Curtis is like the exact opposite of that, where he's just like doing his own thing and he doesn't even care if he has anyone else. So, you know, like finding these polar extremes, where I remember right in the beginning of our relationship, we were saying like, wow, we're so different. And like, is that going to work? Like, we're so different. And then we had another conversation a few weeks later. We were like, we're so similar. I don't know if this is going to work. Because in some ways you're so similar, in other ways so different. And, you know, all these questions of like, yeah, is this going to work or not? It really depends on, are we committed to it? Are we committed to make it work? So.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to open up on if Ash and Matt, you two can share a little bit with our audience. I feel like I'm hearing little questions from them listening to this episode about, man, this sounds like such a painstaking process. Y'all are talking about challenge and like, you know, working through such tough things together. And I have to say, from my own perspective, when I was first having my initial paradigm shift and spiritual awakening, you can feel so different inside of yourself and come home and expect your partner to kind of like see this entirely new person, but obviously they see you exactly the same as when you left. And, you know, that sparks all sorts of other egoic things that pop up and want to be validated and seen, and it can lead to entirely different, big, massive other problems. So I'm curious if you can talk about how building this foundation can, yes, take time and be painstaking initially, especially because it's so new to both of you. But over time, do you see yourselves, already like having sort of a practice with your ways of thinking and your ways of approaching conflict, so that you are finding that it's easier to work through issues?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the funny thing is, over the years, the reason why we've really cut straight to the fact that there's challenges is because the only reason we do that is because the world is so over the fairy tale and acting like there aren't any. Mm-hmm. And so by all means, life is glorious together. It is magical. There's for every one time there's a frustration or a trigger that has to be worked through, there's 9 other glorious, magical, beautiful, blissful moments. So I think the only reason why we've noticed, you know, since you brought that up, very quickly in reflection, I was like, yeah, we kind of do always. That's the main thing we talk to people about. But I think it's only because we're trying to be honest and get to the point. Because if we just talk about all the good stuff, everyone's already going to think, okay, that's all BS though.
Or they tend to, in the spiritual community, look for this ideal
candidate. And we don't want to mislead that either.
If it's a twin flame or if it's a soulmate, it's going to be so perfect.
Yeah.
And they're going to be exactly the way that you would imagine that they would be. Yeah. And so we kind of just want to like let go of all those illusions. But yes, definitely the inner work gets easier because you're talking about purifying consciousness.
Yeah, you get closer.
So it's you know, think about cleaning a really dirty building. As you continue to clean it, it gets cleaner, and then maintenance on it isn't so much because you've already done the deep cleaning. So now you just dust here and there, and you know, it's not like this overhaul of like this abandoned building. Like our consciousness, in a sense, because we weren't taught to take care of our consciousness in the same way that we take care of our bodies. We do brush our teeth, we do take a shower every day, we do all these things. Nobody taught us when we were growing up that to take care of our consciousness was a hygiene practice. We need to get rid of negative thoughts. We need to meditate. We need to be in stillness. We need to do self-evaluation. We need to practice, you know, these moral what would I call those? Moral practices. And so we basically let our consciousness get overgrown with dust and mites and maggots and weeds and then it's just this big abandoned building of dirt. And so when you first come together, you know, you're doing that big cleanup on your consciousness. It's a big overhaul. You got to pull the weeds out, you got to dust, you got to take out all the trash. But then the building is clean and it is purified, and you sage it and you light the incense, and then it becomes a very romantic space where you can dwell in as a couple in that big spacious place. It's not like that at the beginning. So just know that it's like a cleanup process.
Yeah. And I think too, another analogy that really works for me is like a nature one of like living here in Hawaii. I've really gotten really close with plants, and I've worked with a lot of plants now. I never knew I had such an obsession with landscaping and growing things until I got here. And I look at it as, you know, where we live right now, first got here was just covered in weeds. It was just whatever. It was just left on its own device. And now, like over the year now, a couple of years, like landscaping it and beautifying it, it's really turned into this like beautiful Eden. And you get to enjoy the fruits of that forever. And I've literally like planted fruit trees, and they took a lot of work in the beginning. I had to like get the soil right. I had to nurture them. I had to keep pruning them. Like, you know, it took a while to get them nurtured, but now they literally will fruit for the rest of my life. And that I think works for me too, is the analogy of like, you're creating Eden together, and that's going to take some landscaping. It's going to take pulling weeds. And the same as like Ashley, you know, with like a building, whichever you relate to.
I thought of the building because this building we're in right now was that building too. Like this hallway was overgrown. It was a chicken coop. Basically, there's chickens living in it. Yeah. There was poop everywhere. It was an abandoned building, and now it is our sanctuary. And that took conscious effort in the beginning, and it's kind of synonymous with what we were going through in that time, because we feel like some of our deepest inner work has taken place since we've moved to Hawaii. And I'm sure that will keep happening throughout our lives, but as our inner work progressed, so did our external environment start to show that, and it's been really beautiful.
Yeah. And so the fun silver lining behind it is that, if just like the analogy is kind of visualizing for us all, I get to wake up every day now, and that beauty is already there. So when it comes to the relationship, we get to wake up every day, and that deep connection and that intimacy and that maturity is already there. The fruits of the work are there every day, and they're low hanging. You just get to pick them off and enjoy them every day, because you're like, I did the work. So in a sense, the relationship becomes the most glorious thing I could ever testify and talk about. Like, my marriage is everything to me. It is my rock and my foundation. It's the literal source of all my joy and my growth and my maturity, and it's everything. And so I could go on and on talking about the benefits of it, a thousandfold in comparison to the work it took, because it's insane how much it gives in return. It's very similar to like the scriptures of like, you'll give thanks and it will be given back to you a thousandfold. It's very much so like that. Like, do the work and it will come back to you a thousandfold.
And I want to just one last analogy, because he did talk about the trees and the fruit. Because of the trees and the fruit here, when we plant one tree, like the banana tree, it's fractals. It just continues to reproduce itself. So when you plant one tree, now there's 4, because it reseeds. It
keeps sprouting off the root. So we were reflecting on it the other day, looking at it. Like, I planted a couple, and now there's like 6, because they just keep sprouting off the base, and there's more and more. And so it's been this profound thing to witness, because it's taught us a lot about the work we do, because we're all mirrors of nature. Mm-hmm. So as you plant that seed, it will grow and start exponentially, spreading.
The proof is all around us in nature.
So beautiful. Oh my gosh. I just love it. Both of those, I feel like, those are going to be like the main audio bites that we're going to be taking out. I'm like, this is so beautiful. Both of them, such a beautiful depiction of a conscious partnership and what it means. And I love that you touched on it too, that you kind of focus more on the challenges, because so many people are, seeking that idealized relationship, and we see it so much on like Instagram or social media, these like perfect relationships, and then people kind of get almost like sick of it to see it and want to go more into the nitty gritty and learn more about what are the challenges of it. But yeah, ultimately, when we find ourselves in a relationship that has mostly challenges and mostly triggers, and it's just on a continuous way of like trying to challenge us all the time, then it's something to look into and be like, okay, how much is it worth it to still be committed to that relationship? So I want to ask you too, what is your take on, when do you feel like it is enough work that you put into a relationship where you just don't see the fruits, where you just don't see the harvest, where you just can't, or where the blessings are just way smaller than the work that you put in?
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing, we actually get this question a lot. We always tell people that the most important thing is, do you see in the partner the actual genuine interest? Because if that's there and there's a commitment there, then anything's worth waiting for, in a sense. But the person you have to both have, that's why we say the foundation of our relationship is that we both are extremely like obsessed and will never go back on personal growth. So that's kind of like how we know that even if a time gets really hard and the fruits are not there and like it's drying up, the well's drying up, it's like those are the moments where we know that our commitment within ourselves is we will persevere, just give us time. And so that's the biggest thing, is just to check in, because if your partner really cares or not. And so it has to be genuine. If they're doing it for you, then yeah, it might be something that's not going to work. It has to be of their own free will, and it has to be their own passion, because if it's not going to stick, and it will eventually lead to resentment, and there's a whole cascade of things that will happen that are very predictable. And so that's the biggest thing, is we always come back to, is it has to be a genuine self-interest. It has to be a serious practice and dedication, because it's not always fun. So they have to really, really want it for themselves.
Yeah, and the big red flag is for people who reach out to us about whether or not to leave the relationship is if they're trying to push their partner to grow and the partner doesn't want to grow.
Yeah.
So that's, that partner who is pushing the other one to grow, trying to make them be different, trying to make them awaken in a sense. That's our own stuff that we need to look at. And that isn't actually the partner. We need to look at that ourselves. And that's one of the biggest red flags for us that we see is one person, it's usually the woman, wants the husband or the boyfriend to be better, do better, wants him to grow, instead of acknowledging that he's his own individual sovereign being who has his own life path and is choosing for himself what he wants to do in this life. And you cannot make or force interest in spiritual awakening. That has to be inspired within the individual. And so if that's you, because that seems to be the most common thing we get, is your two options are to make peace with that and to look at yourself and be like, where am I pushing my agenda onto my partner?
And to be an example, and to just be the best you can do is be an example in that case.
Right. Or to ask yourself, maybe I'm not okay with that. Maybe I do want to be in a relationship where the other person has that same value that I have, and to have the courage to leave instead of putting you both through torment. Because I was that person before I met Matt. I was actually in a relationship living with my boyfriend. We had a dog. We had an apartment. We were talking about marriage, and he was not interested in spiritual awakening in the same depth that I was. And I started to script and write out, you know what? If it's him, I'm not going to force it on him. I will be patient, and it will be revealed to me if he's interested in taking this path together. We call it the yoga of relationship. If we're going to use our relationship for the purpose of spiritual awakening. And if he's not, I will have the courage to leave and be open to meeting that new person and give up this life, this house, this, this pet that we have, and like this whole thing that was really scary. And so I had to come to peace with that. And when I did come to peace with that, boom, that's when Matt showed up in my life.
Yeah, I think that's important on this topic. Ash was in a relationship when we met. I mean, this took a lot of courage on her part, because she had to leap into faith in trusting me. We hadn't even met. And I told her, well, hey, like, this is getting to a point where you kind of need to be single. Like, I can't keep talking to you. It seems inappropriate. And she decided, and she had to decide, and that was big. And so there are moments like that. We ourselves are a testament of that. She had to really decide and see into her partner's heart and see, was he genuinely interested? And he just wasn't. And it was actually, it's even obvious now looking back and seeing where his life went. And that could be really liberating for people, because you could be missing out on a life you really want. And it takes a lot of courage, though, to accept that for yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so we are about 2/3 in. And we have not begun touching on the inner work. I mean, we have been this entire time, but I specifically I have something that I want to read out of this that I've really been sitting with the last week, especially. So I would love for you two to expand on this, and I'll be asking you a question about it too. So this is in the Meet Your Mind section of the Inner Workbook, and it says, true freedom and lasting happiness are found in the balance between effort and non-attachment to your roles. By giving your very best in all that you do and simultaneously letting go of outcome or merit, you will be truly fulfilled and full of joy. Whatever you are called to do, know that you are born to play your perfect part in this grand symphony, and it can only be you to do it. No one else can be you. That is why this is your hero's journey, for it can only be you. You are the one. You are absolutely vital, wanted, and needed. Each one of us has a specific, meaningful part to play in this great theater of the divine. And yet, with that being said, do not take your role in life so seriously that you make living a burden.
Whew, so well read.
have been reading over this passage so much, and I feel like it really speaks to, for me, way back in 2015, when I was like, I would like pop out of my room in the yoga teacher training that we were at together. And I think, Matt, it was when you were in town too. And I was like popping out to ask you two these questions on existentialism, and just like, oh, well, what about this? Okay. And then I would go back into my room and like contemplate it for a while. And those were the evenings that I Googled paradigm shift too. And I was like, okay, I think this is what's happening right now. So like whenever you two dropped the bomb on me about looking at life through the lens of a video game, I had never thought about anything like that before in my life. And it was a lot to take in. And my question for you is, do you really feel into, I love that you mentioned the simulation piece earlier. And do you really actively in your everyday life feel into this being a simulation and you just being an avatar in like what it is that you're supposed to be doing here? And how do you really release that egoic attachment that says like, oh, you know, like pops up with all the fears and stuff? And how do you quiet that says, okay, I am guided. I'm a part of the cosmos. You two are doing such amazing things in the last 5 years. It's like wild, everything that you've accomplished and put out and stuff.
That was the best little snippet from the book ever, and your commentary on it is just so good. And
I just want to take a moment and revel in like the profundity of that, like the fact that you just read that and with all the insight you gleaned from it. I think to answer your question right away, like in this moment, I can't take any credit for that. Like how much beauty and joy that just brought to you. I'm in amazement too, because there's no attachment to that. That's why we literally didn't even put our names on the cover of the book, because this is a perfect example of how God brought that through to you, and look at how much you connected with it. And I'm like reading, I'm listening to your version of it. I'm like, just like, wow, that's like so beautiful. but as a listener too, like, so anyway, that just right away shows the point, proves the point in a sense. Like we played our part, we channeled it in a sense, we wrote it, but in a lot of ways, like we didn't write it. It was given to us, and it was downloaded, and we just kind of in a sense translated it. And so anyway, Ashley's the master of the video game thing. She's, I'm sure, the one who told you that, so she can answer that one. But I will say it was hilarious. Last night we were tripping out on this as a simulation. So yes, we think that every day.
yeah, so I like to play around and feel into the concept or the theory that we are in a simulation, that this world, that this planet and this experience that we're having, this 3D experience, is very similar to what I would relate to that movie Divergent. Have you guys seen that movie Divergent?
Yeah,
I think I have.
So
or
good.
Inception or Matrix. All three movies do a pretty good job.
I really like Divergent because in
one.
Divergent they're in a very advanced, modern world where they believe that the way to create a perfect society is to put people into a simulation where they put on headphones and the goggles.
No, they take a.
Oh.
It's like a hallucination.
They hallucinate.
Yeah.
But they watch it on a screen.
No, they're in it.
Yeah, but the other people watch it on a screen.
Oh, sure.
So basically, they go into a video game. They go into like Jumanji, the movie Jumanji. They go into the video game, and it feels very real. And everything that's happening to them is an exact mirror of their greatest fears, for the purpose of them being able to face those fears and to see how they respond. And when they see how they respond, they're put into the perfect utopia world for them. So if you're somebody who's a thinker, you go into the erudite, the thinker world, because you responded with logic. And if you respond with violence and physicality, you go into the dauntless world after the simulation, because you're a very physical warrior type energy. And what the main character does in this movie is she's divergent. She masters all the skills, emotional, physical, mental, and essentially she wakes up in the simulation and realizes it's a simulation and basically meditates and transcends it all and says, this is a simulation, I'm not afraid. And when she realizes it's a simulation, you know, she basically is on God mode. She can just, all her superpowers come out and she has no fear. And that's how I feel this world is it's a simulation for us to see how we respond, to see who we really are, and to see what we're capable of, and to essentially be in a simulation that doesn't have the literal repercussions of if this world was real.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, in Jumanji, when they die in the video game, they don't really die in person, you know? Our eternal souls can never die.
Mm-hmm.
So we might die in this video game on Earth, but it's not actually dangerous. Ram Dass says to die is actually really safe,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a simulation.
Yeah.
So we're in a video game. You die in the video game, but you don't actually die. I imagine myself sitting somewhere, just like in Divergent, where I feel like this is a whole lifetime, but I've really only been in that chair for 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
I feel that in my life. And when you play with that, the whole purpose of this experiment, to think this way, is because it loosens, we say in the book, it loosens your chokehold on life. Because when you realize that this is a simulation, you can experience the joy of playing without the fear and the stress and the worry of taking life so seriously that you make it a burden.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's meant to be for our experiencing. It's meant to be for our experimenting. It's meant to be for our joy, and even for our pain and suffering is all for our benefit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you go and you play the video game and you play it over and over and you face the villains, you develop skills. Eventually you get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
And to see our life this way, it makes living a lot easier. And the challenge then is in every moment to remind yourself of this analogy, so that you can take yourself out of your character and watch yourself instead. And you'll find that your really intense emotions soften a bit. And sometimes you'll even be able to switch. I've noticed from my own testimony that I can go from being really enraged to laughing in a few seconds at myself, just from rethinking about life this way.
Yes.
And in the yoga system, this is what it's all about. I mean, yoga teaches that this is all the dream of God. It's like Indra's dream, and with every breath in, God births a new universe, and with every breath out, it disappears, and this goes on and on for all eternity. And so the whole path of self-realization in yoga is to wake up to the dream, that this is the dream of God, and all of us are in the mind of God, and we're all the same mind, we're all the same self, dreaming each other, so that we can do exactly what Ashley was just saying, to experience, to get to enjoy being an individual and all the joy that comes with that, because you have uniqueness, you have your own path, you have the ability to discover who you are. And to get into the topic of effort and non-attachment, I would love to share kind of my story on that, because that has been the hardest thing in the world for me to understand. And for Ashley, it's been a little easier. She's a way better practitioner of it. And she's been teaching me for years now, because my whole life, I was an extremely strong-willed person. And if I said I was going to do it, I did it. Whatever I set my mind to, I achieved. And my will was like really a kind of my biggest asset. So it seemed almost impossible for me to not be attached to outcomes. And so when Ash was like teaching me and really drilling in like effort and non-attachment, it was hard to let go that the thing that I think is helping me is actually the thing causing me a lot of suffering. Because I would become so attached to outcomes that if they didn't happen the way I wanted them to, I would become frustrated or angry or impatient. And these things became my greatest like Achilles heel. These were like my greatest challenges, is those energies I just mentioned, like impatience and frustration, anger and expectation. So to really liberate myself from that was to keep letting go of that this matters, that this defines me. Because so long as I was like, this is me, this is this story, this Matthew, this body, what he does, like so long as this is who I am, then of course I'm going to be attached. But as soon as I realized, no, you're just a consciousness, and all of this is going to turn to dust, none of it's going to matter. All that's going to matter is who you were and what energy and consciousness you were throughout the experience. And that goal shift in what I was paying attention to is what allowed me to finally let go of outcome and attachment to outcome and still put forth the effort. Because what I would normally do is swing back and forth. If I didn't have any attachment to outcome, then I would probably stop giving effort, because I'd be like, well, then who cares? And if I put in a ton of effort, it was like almost impossible to not care about getting a result. So the biggest thing is making that shift, I think, for us, is to not, when you play a video game, you don't identify with the video game. You identify with the experience you're having while playing it. So let's say same with a movie. You watch a movie, you play a video game. The point is you're entering into a simulated environment for an experience. So you enjoy it, but you don't like say, I am this game. I am Mario, or like I am this character, whatever game it is you're playing. You just enjoy the experience of it. And I think that's what it comes down to in this life, is how can we allow our character to play its role, surrender that to the divine will, because the divine will has the greatest role for that character to play. And all we have to do is get out of the way and let that character play its part. And that's that symphony aspect of what you just read, of like, only you can do it. Each one of us has a very specific path that we're here to be on. And if we let go, we can actually enjoy the fullness of that potential, because the only thing that's ever stopping that potential from becoming is our own fears, which only can come from attachment. As soon as we let go of attachment to outcome, the avatar, this character, is free to manifest its greatest abilities, because it has nothing holding it back anymore. Mm-hmm. It has no more doubt. It has no more questioning of itself. It has no more fear, and it therefore walks on water, right? Mm-hmm. It has no doubt. It's a perfect embodiment of faith. Yeah. And so that's why the yogis have the cities, like Ashley mentioned in Divergence. She's like, she has superpowers. And we have so many documented accounts of yogis with these cities, these superpowers, these mystical abilities that just start happening for them. But it's not out of their will. It's just because they officially aren't resisting any magic of their life. It's all just happening spontaneously, because they've surrendered their will and the outcome to their life, to the magic. And when you do that, life becomes very mystical, and you don't know what's next, and yet it doesn't matter. You trust that everything is unfolding beautifully, and then life becomes a really like interesting experience, because you're like, I wonder what the next level is. I wonder where this world goes next. I wonder what quest I'm going to be on next. Like, and instead of trying to figure it out, you just enjoy it with curiosity.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I almost want to switch those terms, effort and unattachment. They come from the Yoga Sutras, and I wish actually it would say unattachment and effort, because when we let go of our attachment, that is when we can have full effort, because we're not afraid of failure. We're not afraid of what's going to happen if I try. We're not afraid of what if it doesn't work out. When we let go of our attachment, we actually are able to have full effort. So
maybe perhaps for the first time.
Perhaps for the first time. So I actually wish it was reversed, and maybe we will do that.
Yeah, so beautiful.
I love that this was such a big part of y'all's reality and sort of things to lean into. It was the two main words of our 200-hour yoga teacher training. It was separated into abhyasa and vairagya, the effort and the non-attachment. What a beautiful thing.
And I want to touch on the video game theory, because I feel very connected to that theory as well. And what I like to see it too is that it's almost like, I love how they do it in Divergent, but also in Rick and Morty, there's this episode where he goes into a video game and he plays out this lifetime, and then he wakes up and he's surrounded by all his loved ones and all his friends, like we have all our people beyond the veil that are with us, and they're just watching us being in this video game. And while we're playing, they're here, like they can hold our hands, or they can support us and be there with us. And if we really tune into that, we can feel them. We may not see them in the simulation, but we can feel their presence, because actually we are with them. And
It's
it's
so
just
funny. Ashley was just saying that last night.
yeah, I love that we're having this conversation. The whole time I was like goosebumps. I'm like, yes, oh my gosh, it's so good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I just stepped out for the bathroom really quick. Did I miss something? I know that you were sharing about the video game and stuff. I don't know if y'all already started wrapping up.
Yeah, we have, Hannah was just mentioning that there's, she was mentioning an example where there's also the reminder that there's all these loved ones and like angels and people also watching us in this experience that are like here for us and guiding us through it. And Ash was just mentioning that last night, that like we're being watched, like we're being guided over. We're not in this alone. It's in a sense, they're all interested in lovingly wanting to find out who we are too, and they're like guiding us to find out, that's why we call it the hero's journey, is we all have a heroine and hero in us that is like our full manifested potential. And there's always, just like we say, it's said in the book, you will have help along this journey, but ultimately you must actualize it yourself.
Yeah, I love that this got brought up and I wasn't the one to bring it up. This is exactly what I was speaking with Hannah about before we hopped on this call, the inner demons that I've been battling, because I've been edging myself to this precipice of starting to do more out-of-town facilitations and just really stepping into this workshop facilitator about all of these modalities and tools that we can use to come into deeper alignment with ourselves and work on just a lot of things that we have that we want to bring into balance with ourselves. And there's been this, egoic attachment that's like, who do you think you are? The imposter syndrome, just like, perfectionism popping up. And this is what I was speaking with her about. And that's why I had to touch on the simulation. And it's such an interesting thing, the way that the mind works, where it's like your divine truth and your higher self. When you have that relationship cultivated, you can take the inhale and breathe into that, and it's there, and it, you feel its truth. And then on the exhales, it's like all the little inner demon voices that are starting to come in that are like, no, but we get the space. We want to be louder than that other voice. And it's like, I know both things in the same moment. And it's just, I guess, like who I'm allowing to take up my space more with.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you actually mentioned that in a workbook too. Like, what frequency do you tune into?
Mm-hmm.
Like a radio station, tuning into different channels. What do we want to tune into?
Yeah, and Brittany too. It's funny because in the book we refer to it that same way with the Cherokee story of like, which wolf are you feeding? There's two wolves in the mind, like one is fear and one is goodness. And I think that's really important, just for whatever it's coming up, Brittany, to share with you is when you go through all of those fears and doubts and things like that, something that really helped me is to reflect and meditate on anything I perceived as a failure or a setback in the past, and to realize and see that absolutely every one of those was not a failure, and everything was actually a guidance and a growth and a good thing, and everything worked out in my benefit. And if you can really accept that there is no failure and there is no wrong choice, you can really be liberated from all doubt and self-consciousness and insecurity, because you can realize that everything is always exactly as it should be. And that sounds really beautiful, but I think what helped me actualize it is to actually reflect on literal things I thought were big failures, and to actually see that they weren't. And that really helped it settle into the security of like, I don't have to worry about, am I saying the right thing or am I doing the right thing, because it's all perfect in due time. It will all be revealed.
And also back to that unattachment, because all the fear that we have, and we feel all these things too, is our attachment. It's thinking that we're responsible for what's happening, when really it's all the divine playing through you. You're not responsible for these opportunities or for these gifts you have or for what you're planning or what you're going to say. It's all God moving through you. So you can let go of all that fear because it's just happening
It's not
through
even up
you
to you.
and to you. So you're just following God's will. So how can you be afraid of that? You know, that's what, when we think we're alone and it's us and we're the doing and we're the doer, that's when we feel that doubt, because we're like, who am I to do this, right?
Yeah.
And that's the forgetting that you are that. You are what is guiding you to do that. You are being guided.
Yeah.
It is moving through your video game self from your higher self, and you're just showing up.
You're the vehicle
You're
and the
just showing
vessel.
up.
I think too, something that could help a lot is to understand that the impact and the influence you may be having on other people is not determined by you either. That was really huge for me, because like, even as we're on this interview right now, and you just read the book, and like I said, it when you read it, I was like, okay, that's really amazing. That's you are the one having that inspiration. I didn't give that to you. That's not by me. And so in the same way, maybe with the things we've been saying this whole time, if anyone's having intuitions and guidance and love and evoking anything special, that's their guidance and that's their connection. And we're not responsible. I didn't do any of that. So there's no real credit to be taken, and therefore there's no failure to be had either. So there's a release when you let go of attachment, because you actually realize, in a sense, you're not really doing anything. You're just kind of being yourself, and then allowing what happens to happen.
And I want to add this, because in the book we have the themes of consciousness, right? And there are these different frequencies that you can be embodying, and thus having a mirrored reality of that frequency. So let's say somebody is in guilt. They have a frequency that is a exact attraction for guilt. And so everything in their life, they feel guilt about, or they have judgment toward other people. They project guilt. They have this immense guilt. You go to teach your workshop and you have this divine inspiration. Each theme of consciousness is going to perceive it from where they are at, and you have nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with it.
And also the same goes for the teachings. Wisdom is in every theme of consciousness. Somebody can have teachings of great spirituality but be in guilt, and that's why we see so many religions using the spiritual teachings to push guilt, because from their paradigm, they, being in a frequency of guilt, see the teachings from a place of guilt, whereas some religions are really embodying or attracting people who have pride. So from where they are at, they view the teachings from pride. So the teachings are all the same, and everybody is going to intake them from their theme of consciousness, and everyone's going to be giving them from their theme of consciousness. So in a sense, it's all very interesting, because we're all just having our own little world here.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something so freeing when you really accept that, because you first realize humbly that like you don't do anything, which is kind of humbling, because you're like, I was so invested in like my ego, like being epic and doing things. And it's like, well, no, your epicness is in your ability to surrender, if anything. And the next thing is on the other person's part, their interpretation has nothing to do with how you speak or what you say, because they're going to interpret it no matter what, however they want. And so you can't really control that, no matter how eloquently you try to prepare, no matter how perfectly you think you have the workshop, lined up. It just doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, their frequency will dominate and they will interpret it how they want. It's all very freeing when we accept this. It's all very like, oh wow, there's no pressure then. I could just just be myself, and everyone's gonna have their own experience, and that's a beautiful thing. There's no magic to it. There's no like pressure. There's nothing dramatic needed. We're all just living our perfect part.
I love that. I just actually recently made a post about being a trigger and embracing being a trigger to others, because it was for me a really hard time as a recovering people pleaser, because I felt so attached to the reactions of other people to what I was doing. And then to just get into this place of like, I'm just going to shine my light and be fully who I am, and it's going to trigger some people, and that's okay. you know, and because even like for myself, I know how triggers can be so so beautiful for growth if we allow them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I love that we just touched on that, because even in relationships, when we are in a conscious relationship, knowing that there are going to be times where we're going to trigger the other partner just by being ourselves. And that's actually beneficial for the relationship, because it helps awaken something inside the other. It helps them become aware of something. And then it's up to the other person what he or she is going to do with that.
Yeah, it's really profound to accept that at all times, in all places, there is only goodness unfolding. There is only benefit. There is only love. There is only growth. To really step into the non-duality that everything is always perfect and always loving. It's interesting. It's an interesting invitation and challenge, because we obviously know there's so many things our mind would perceive as very wrong and painful. So it's something to explore and meditate on, for sure.
I love that you just mentioned that, because in our episodes, we usually give like a little action guides for our audience. So what would you say, like in regards to conscious relationships, like what would be your action guide for the audience?
I think the invitation would be to use the uncomfortable or challenging situations as invitations to go inside yourself. And it seems so simple, and yet, how often are we really doing it?
And I think a good way to do that we've found very effective is to preface every uncomfortable situation with the truth that there's an inner child within you that is afraid and is seeking to be loved. And I can promise and kind of guarantee and testify in a sense of, if you do this, the other person will soften, because it's almost impossible not to. And, this last year, I've had to heal a lot of random anger that I did not know existed within me. And aggression is one of the hardest ones to deal with. And if it worked for that, it will work for anything. And one of the things we all developed on this property, because it wasn't just with Ash and I, is we developed a system of prefacing when we were feeling triggers and things coming up with the preface of, the little girl inside of me or the little boy inside of me is feeling, and then ABC. It's like, it's really setting the stage for like, I don't identify with this. I'm just trying to help heal this. So like, if it was me and like being impatient, I'd be like, the little boy in me is feeling left out, or that I'm not going to get taken care of. And so I need to be aggressive so I'll be heard. Or, suddenly it really softens it, because you're like, oh, this isn't like some adult man. This is a little innocent angel boy who's just like lost himself and is just confused. And maybe it's because his dad beat him, or maybe it's because he was chastised really harshly as a child, or if the little girl is scared, it's because maybe something happened. Like, we all have a story and we all have a past and we have wounds. And if you preface and lead into dialogue with that, it's really powerful.
So on top of looking at yourself, identifying your inner child and communicating that as effectively as you can, as a partner, challenge yourself to see your partner's inner child. And there's something inside of us in this Western conditioning that tells us we should withhold love when the other person is acting out. So if they're throwing a tantrum, or they're getting aggressive, or they're crying, we should withhold our love until they stop.
Yeah, and it kind of comes from our generation's raising babies with like the idea of just let them cry. It all stems back from that kind of a belief. And so a lot of us have, and in our parents' generation, it was even worse. They were even more physical with kids. So I think from my perspective, it all comes back to that kind of concept of like, oh, I'll help you and I'll love you when you stop.
So the challenge then is to recognize the part of you that wants to put up a wall and say, I'm not going to love you until you stop, or I'm not going to talk to you until you're done, or I'm not going to hold you until you stop crying. And to challenge yourself to see them like you would an innocent 2-year-old or 3-year-old, and to go give them the love that they are crying out for, and to go
Mhm.
hold them, comfort them, to help them heal that wound, because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from feeling abandoned. It's coming from feeling unloved or unseen or not heard. And all we're all doing is screaming out in whatever way we can to confirm that we will be loved no matter what.
Yeah.
So can you show your partner that in their worst moment, that they're loved no matter what? And if both parties can commit to that, talking about their inner child wounds when they have it, and also showing up in that same way for your partner, then I think that a lot of healing can take place.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It seems like we could literally just sit and continue this beautiful dialogue for many, many more minutes. I know that we did previously talk about Matt having an appointment, and I really want to honor that time. So we really want to thank both of you for spending this time with us. It's always so fascinating. The conversation never goes anything like, I anticipated. Another thing about the unattachment.
Yeah, see, it just happens how it's supposed to.
Yeah, and always infinitely better than I expected. So we always have these questions that we ask our guests, and we change the words around a little bit because we do have this beautiful divine union. And we want to start by just asking, what does sacred mean to you?
I feel like we're both silent because when you say sacred,
Maybe that's our answer. In a lot of ways, I guess that is the ultimate for me, I suppose, is it's unspoken because it's so sacred, perhaps. It's kind of like the traditions that literally won't say the word God because it's so holy that to even say it would be to somehow limit it. So I think that'd be my first instinct, but I could offer some more for it, in that sacred is, to me, it's the epitome of goodness, of compassion, of kindness, of gentleness, and love and nurturance. It's all things pure and loving. It's that mother, like, loving her baby, like the child. It's the mother and father loving that baby with so much utter overwhelm that it feels impossible to love something so much. To me, that's how I feel God loves us, in such a sacred way that it's unspeakable. It's so profound. You can't even possibly put words to that level of love.
And to me, sacred is our potential. It's what we were created and intended to be and experience. It's our innate state. It's this whole world and this whole life. It's creation. And there's nothing that is not creation. So there's nothing that is not sacred.
Beautiful. Thank you. And so what does having a sacred union mean for you?
What immediately comes to mind is to see God, your partner, as God. When I look at, I'm like gonna cry. When I look at my wife, I strive to see that she is goddess embodied, that she is literally an angel in a mirror that was sent to me to help me become and wake up to who I really am. So as a sacred union to us, it's to honor your partner as a divine gift and a companion that was sent to you to help you awaken that you are God as well.
Wow.
I will leave it at that.
Oh, that's so powerful. It's so powerful to really slow to the depth that you two have brought here energetically today. Is just really, really potent, and I really want to thank both of you so much for bringing this. It's such medicine to slow things down to this speed and to really sink deeply into something, to this witnessing of what's going on in this exact moment, rather than slapping like a label on it, like #goals, when they look at you or your relationship. And yeah, I just wanted to say that. Our last question is, what are 3 ways that you both turn something normal and mundane into something magical and sacred?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is being present with whatever I am doing. Because when we're present with that, what we're doing, we're honoring the moment, we're honoring the life, we're honoring the experience as a really divine, miraculous moment. When you really break it all down, like, what are we even doing here? How am I even speaking through this body and this planet spinning through space? It's really far out if you can just pause and take it all in. And the most mundane thing can turn into the most profound experience by just letting yourself be present with what's actually happening. I think it's so far out that we distract ourselves, because if we really took it in, we would just be tripping every moment. We would be tripping out, like nothing would get done, right? We always talk about that. We're just like, we would just be, it's so far out. So I think that to make the mundane sacred is to just be fully present, to just, even if it's just for 60 seconds, to honor it. Whatever you're drinking, your tea, or you're looking at, a sunrise,
And I would say another way is to challenge yourself to withdraw your awareness, to realize that your body is also the environment, and that you are actually witnessing this entire world as one thing, non-duality of creation. And the invitation is to realize that your body and your external environment are actually the same thing. They're this, you're observing the same thing. They're both external in a sense. We tend to think that the body is in here and it's me and it's moving around in the world. And my invitation to make things another level of sacredness is to withdraw yet another layer and realize that the body and its thoughts and everything it does is also environmental. It's also changing, just like the weather. You have no control over it. It's just doing its thing. And to really just honor and witness it as this sacred thing, just like when you look at a plant or something beautiful in nature, understand that, can you withdraw yet another layer and see your own avatar as that sacred, that holy. You don't judge an ocean wave or a sunset. We just admire it and feel it. Can we extend that same level of love and admiration to the vessel too? Because we're pretty hard on it usually.
Yeah.
So I think the invitation that I've had a lot of success with is to see the body as also part of and the same as the environment, and that all of this is a witnessing of the same creation.
be grateful. Grateful for every moment, every breath, every experience, and all your senses, all of the sights, sounds, colors, tastes, smells.
The experience.
Be grateful.
Yes, what beautiful words to round it all up. This wonderful, amazing, magical episode that we had. Oh my gosh, wow. So many goosebumps and tears, and just such a blessing to have you both here. Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. We honor it so much for Matt being our very first man on the Sacred Sister podcast. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, we actually are planning for, well, we are in the High Priestess season now. The next season is going to be the Empress season. And then we're moving into the Emperor season, where we are planning to bring in a lot more men onto our podcast. So thank you, Matt, for opening up this portal to bring in that masculine energy. Thank you.
And can both of you let us know what's upcoming for you, where people can find you, what sort of, I know you have a retreat coming up, if you want to just share.
Yeah, so if you found the themes of consciousness and this talk about shifting your paradigm very interesting, we have the book, The Inner Work book. You can get that on Amazon. It's just The Inner Work. And then if you're interested in doing an in-person with us, we have a retreat in Bali. It's May 9th through the 16th. And then we have a yoga teacher training that's really focused on energy healing rather than, the physical workout of yoga. It's more focused on the inner work and the energy body and purifying consciousness using yoga and shamanic techniques to purify consciousness. So we have that training in Kauai in August 10th through 20th. So, yeah.
And we're otherwise the Yoga Couple on pretty much all the platforms. Our website's the Yoga Couple. You can find information, all those things we just mentioned, and Instagram and Facebook.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I must say, in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I have to get the backstory on how they wound up on Battle of the Fittest Couples, but that one we'll push to social media and we'll DM about it. I was so fascinated and curious. Like, that was the biggest surprise, I think, of the year. I was like, what? These guys are doing what?
It was someone
found us.
Someone just asked us the producer asked us to do it. I think they wanted the contrast. And we tried to say no 3 times and it kept coming back. So we thought it was,
okay, I guess
it must be doing this. So.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, just to speak briefly on it, I watched all the episodes that you two were a part of. I was so it was cool. It seems like something is changing in TV where, it's not so easy to ostracize the yogi mentality, and, people are getting more and more curious about it. I saw that some of the hosts had been asked a question about who would you like to hang out with the most, and they actually said that they would learn the most from sitting with you two.
Yeah, it was really wild. I agree with you. I think that the shift is very beginning stages, but I think people are really over the our lower themes being exalted on TV as something that we should strive for. I think people are interested in elevating themselves. So it's starting to show up, I think.
Most definitely. And thank you for the way that both of you showed up on that show too. I was fascinated to know how they would depict you as characters, and I love that they input some of your counseling work with some of the couples, and it was just a really beautiful way that they depicted you.
Cool.
Thank you.
And what a way to be of service to the world too, to put yourself out there into the lion's cave and just staying so true to who you are authentically. That's amazing.
We were there for 28 days, filmed 24/7. It was
a very interesting
very
experience.
I bet. What was the battle cage called?
Rage cage.
Rage cage.
Yeah, I was terrified.
You're like, I don't see ourselves going into that at all. Anyways, beautiful wrap up. Thank you both so much, Matt. I apologize that you're getting out here later than you had anticipated. Okay, perfect. So thank you so much, both of you, for being on this. Honestly, I can't find words to describe how beautiful it was, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We love you.
Love you guys.
Love you. Thank
Love
you.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.
You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Namaste.